My name is Elena Harper. I'm 35. At 2:47 in the morning on a Tuesday in February 5 years ago, I was lying on a gurney in the hallway of Mercy General Hospital in Torrington, Connecticut, watching a ceiling tile with a water stain shaped like a crescent moon. And I was thinking, someone should call my family. My chest felt like a car had parked on it. My left arm had gone numb 40 minutes earlier. A nurse named Sophia, I would learn her name later, much later, was pressing an oxygen mask to my face and telling me to breathe slow, just breathe slow, that's it, keep your eyes open. My heart was failing, not metaphorically, not the way people say, my heart broke. The left anterior descending artery, the one cardiologists call the widowmaker, had narrowed to 14% of its normal diameter, and I was 30 years old, and I was alone, and someone had already called my family. They just didn't come. Before I go on, if stories about standing up for yourself mean something to you, really mean something, please hit like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now and what time it is there. I read every single one. Okay, let me tell you what happened. The hospital records show the call was made at 2:53 a.m., February 11th, 6 minutes after I was admitted. My mother's cell phone, my father's cell phone, then the house line. 3 calls, logged, time-stamped, answered. My father picked up on the second ring. The nurse on duty, a woman named Patricia, told him his daughter had been brought in by ambulance, that she was in critical condition, that they were prepping her for emergency open-heart surgery and needed next-of-kin consent, and someone needed to come. My father said, and this is in the hospital's documentation, not my memory, because I was unconscious by then. My father said, "She's not our responsibility anymore," he hung up. The consent was handled by hospital administration. I signed nothing. I woke up 41 hours later with a 6-inch scar down the center of my chest, a breathing tube being removed from my throat, and Sophia's hand on my forearm, telling me I was okay. I made it. I was going to be okay. There was no one else in the room. The total bill came to $183,400. My insurance covered $148,400. The remaining $35,000 was mine. I was 30 years old, I had just had my sternum cracked open, and I owed $35,000, and my family had told the hospital I wasn't their problem. But here's what I need you to understand, before any of the rest of this makes sense. This did not come from nowhere. This moment, this man, my father, hanging up a phone at 2:53 in the morning while his daughter went into surgery, this was not an accident. This was the end of a very long road that started the day I stopped being useful to them. Let me take you back 22 years, to when I was 13 years old, and summer in the Harper house smelled like cut grass, and my Uncle Daniel's barbecue lighter fluid, and the particular way he laughed, which was loud and a little too long, like he was always surprised that something was funny. Uncle Daniel was my father's younger brother. He was the one who showed up to my school play when my parents had tickets to some dinner thing my father called networking. He was the one who drove 40 minutes each way to bring me art supplies when I got into the regional drawing competition in 7th grade. He had this pickup truck, an old red Ford with a cracked dashboard and a pine air freshener that had long since stopped smelling like pine, and he'd let me ride shotgun even when my sister Brooke complained it was her turn. That summer, the summer I was 13, Uncle Daniel and my father had some kind of argument. I never got the full story. What I know is that by September, Daniel wasn't coming to Sunday dinners anymore. By Christmas, his name wasn't mentioned. By the following year, if I brought him up, my mother would get a particular look on her face, a sort of careful blankness, and change the subject. What I didn't know, and wouldn't know for over 2 decades, was that he never forgot me. The last thing he said to me before the silence started, we were sitting on his porch, me eating a popsicle, him drinking lemonade, watching the fireflies come out, was, "You're going to be okay, Ellie, no matter what, you hear me? You're going to be more than okay." I thought he meant the 7th grade. I held on to it anyway. Growing up in the Harper house meant understanding one unspoken rule. Brooke was the point. Everything orbited her. My parents didn't say this out loud. They didn't need to. Brooke got the SAT prep tutor at $120 a session. I got library books. Brooke's college application got 3 rounds of paid professional editing. Mine got a single read-through from my mother, who said it was fine. Brooke's car was bought new. Mine was a 2003 Honda Civic with 98,000 miles that I paid for myself, working weekends at a grocery store. None of this was dramatic, you understand. There were no screaming matches. There were no declarations. It was quieter than that. It was my mother forgetting to mention Thanksgiving had been moved up a day until I'd already bought a train ticket. It was my father's face when I told him I'd passed my CPA exam, not proud exactly, more like relieved that I'd stopped needing something. It was Brooke getting applause at the dinner table, and me getting a nod and my mother saying, "That's good, Elena," and moving on. I built a life in the margins. I got my accounting degree from UConn. I passed my CPA exam on the first try, a 79% pass rate nationally, 82% on my section. I got a staff accountant position at a small firm in Hartford, Weston, and Caldwell Associates. It wasn't glamorous. It was tax returns and payroll audits and a desk that wobbled if you put anything heavier than a coffee mug on the left corner. But it was mine. Brooke, meanwhile, had taken a position in marketing at a mid-size firm in Fairfield. She was good at it. She was good at everything that involved talking to people, managing their impressions of her, making them feel like they were the most important person in the room. My parents talked about her constantly. At every family dinner, which I attended faithfully every 6 weeks or so, there was a Brooke update, a new client she'd landed, a promotion she was being considered for, a trip she was planning. I was asked about work approximately once every 3 dinners. When I answered, the conversation moved on within 90 seconds. Then, in January, 5 years before the night my father hung up the phone, my parents' finances collapsed. My father, Victor Harper, had spent the better part of a decade making bad investments. He had never, to my knowledge, done anything obviously illegal. He was just arrogant about money, in the way that men who have always had some of it often are, certain that his instincts were reliable, that the people warning him were being overly cautious, that the next one would turn it around. He put $80,000 into a real estate development deal that went bankrupt. He refinanced the family home, the one in Glastonbury, the one I grew up in, 3 times. He borrowed against his retirement account. By January of that year, they were $247,000 underwater on the house. His retirement was gutted, and they were 4 months behind on a $2,400 monthly mortgage payment. My sister knew. My mother knew. I did not know, because no one told me, and because at some point during the previous few years, I had been quietly, systematically edited out of the family's information loop. I thought it was just the usual distance. I didn't understand yet that the distance was being managed. Here is what Brooke had been doing, which I would not understand fully until much later. When I sent text invitations to family events, Brooke told my parents, "She's probably already busy, she tends to make plans and forget to tell us." When my parents sent invitations to me through Brooke, which happened because my mother sometimes preferred texting Brooke and asking her to pass things along, Brooke would tell me nothing, or tell me the date had changed, or simply not pass it along at all, and then tell my parents afterward. I told her, she said she might be too tired. When I called my mother on her birthday one year, and she seemed cold and distant, I later found out Brooke had told her I'd forgotten entirely and only called when someone reminded me. It was low level. It was deniable. Every single piece of it could be explained away as miscommunication. That's what made it work. When I had my cardiac event, I had been collecting freelance accounting clients for about 8 months, in addition to my day job, trying to build a cushion. I was exhausted. I was working 60, sometimes 70-hour weeks. My diet was terrible. I was 30 years old, and I was running on 4 hours of sleep and black coffee and the specific anxiety of a woman who knows, somewhere deep in her body, that she cannot afford to break down. My cardiologist, Dr. Anand, told me afterward that the artery narrowing was likely congenital, a defect I'd had since birth that nobody had caught because nobody had been looking. The stress I'd been under had accelerated it. He said I was lucky I survived. He said if the EMT crew had been 3 minutes slower, we would have been having a very different conversation, or no conversation at all. I spent 11 days in the hospital. Then I spent 4 months at home, which at that point was a one-bedroom apartment in New Britain, recovering. Physical therapy 3 times a week. Cardiac rehab. A daily medication regimen that cost $340 a month before my insurance kicked in the copay assistance. I could not work full-time for 6 months. I burned through my savings. I applied for a hardship forbearance on my student loans. I sold my car. Not one member of my immediate family contacted me. I want to be precise about this. Not a phone call, not a text, not a card, not a casserole left on my doorstep, not a voicemail that said, "Just checking in," not a flower from a grocery store with a note attached. Nothing. For 4 months while I was recovering from open-heart surgery at 30 years old, my parents and my sister were completely, deliberately silent. I found out why eventually. Brooke had posted on Facebook, a platform I barely used, but which my extended family monitored closely, 3 days after my surgery, a long post about how our family has been going through such a difficult time lately, dealing with my father's health issues and financial stress, and how some members of the family have chosen to step back during this time, which is heartbreaking but ultimately their choice. She included a photo of herself and my parents at what appeared to be a Sunday dinner, smiling, looking warm and united. The implication was unmistakable. I had abandoned them. I was the one who had pulled away. Their difficult time was my father's health issues. My father, who had a mild case of shingles that resolved within 3 weeks, not my open-heart surgery. My surgery was not mentioned. A cousin on my father's side, a woman named Claire who I'd always liked, sent me a private message 2 weeks later that said simply, "I hope you're okay. People are saying you've been going through some things." I wasn't sure what to believe. I didn't know what to say to her. I said I was fine. I wasn't fine. But I didn't know yet what I was dealing with, and I wasn't ready to fight it. I went back to work 6 months after the surgery. I couldn't return to Weston and Caldwell. They'd had to fill my position. I picked up freelance clients. I rebuilt slowly, painfully slowly, the way you rebuild anything after it's been taken down to the foundation. My medical debt sat at $35,000. I made minimum payments. I kept a notebook where I tracked every dollar. I was 30 years old, and I was starting over, and I was doing it alone, and somewhere across the state, my family was telling people I had chosen to distance myself. 18 months after my surgery, I got a job offer from a small firm in Torrington, Alderman and Pierce Accounting. Senior accountant, $68,000 a year, benefits, a real office with a window that looked out onto a small parking lot, and beyond it, a line of oak trees that turned extraordinary colors in October. My manager was a man named Gerald Alderman, who was 63 years old, who wore the same brown cardigan almost every day, and who told me in my first week, "I don't count anyone's cost here. You work, I pay you. Simple." I cried in my car at lunch that day. Not out of sadness exactly, more out of the specific relief of someone who has been bracing for a blow that doesn't come. I settled into Torrington. I found an apartment on Birchwood Lane. I made two friends, my neighbor, a retired nurse named Harriet, who left vegetables from her garden on my doorstep, and my coworker, a younger accountant named James, who was dry and precise and brought excellent coffee. I did not think about my family every day. Then I did. Then I didn't. Grief for living people is like that. It comes and goes on a schedule you can't predict and don't control. I had been in Torrington for about 6 months when Brooke showed up at my office. I want to describe this carefully, because it matters. It was a Thursday in March, 11:20 in the morning. Gerald had just gone out for a lunch meeting. James was at his desk 20 feet from mine. There was a woman at the front, our receptionist, Donna, who was 24 and had a laugh you could hear through walls. I heard the door. I looked up. Brooke was standing in the entrance of Alderman and Pierce Accounting, wearing a cream-colored coat I didn't recognize, her hair blown out, her expression carrying that particular quality she'd perfected over 30-some years, the look of someone who has already decided how this conversation is going to go. Elena. She said my name the way you'd say the name of someone you were mildly disappointed in. Flat, certain. I put down my pen. Brooke, can we talk somewhere? We're talking now. She looked at James, who was very deliberately not looking at either of us. She looked at Donna. She looked back at me and lowered her voice by about 15%, which was not enough. Mom and Dad need your help. I felt something in my chest go very still. Not my heart. My heart was fine. It had been fine. I monitored it carefully. But something around it, some layer of bracing that I had built over the past 18 months and had almost forgotten was there. Okay, I said. They're going to lose the house. She leaned forward slightly, as if proximity would make me more cooperative. The bank is moving forward with foreclosure. They have until the end of next month. I see. Elena. Her voice sharpened. This is serious. This is Mom and Dad. I understand that. They need $30,000 to bring the mortgage current. If they can do that, they can refinance. Dad's been talking to a broker who thinks, Brooke. I looked at her steadily. I had open heart surgery 2 years ago. I have $35,000 in medical debt. I make $68,000 a year. Her expression shifted. Not into sympathy, into something else. A recalibration. I know the surgery was hard. The surgery was hard, I repeated. You're right. I was alone for 11 days in a hospital and 4 months of recovery because our family told the attending nurse that I wasn't your problem anymore. That's in the records, Brooke. I've read them. Dad was stressed. He wasn't thinking clearly. He was thinking clearly enough to answer the phone and communicate a full sentence. James had stopped typing. I was aware of this without looking at him. Donna had found something very interesting to look at on her computer screen. Elena. Brooke's voice was going smooth now, the way it always did when she was shifting strategies. You've pulled away from us. We've all felt it. You don't return calls. What calls, Brooke? Give me a date. Give me a number. You didn't come to Thanksgiving 2 years in a row. You told me Thanksgiving was moved to Friday. Both times. I have the texts. Something flickered across her face. Very brief. Gone instantly. This family has always supported you, she said. And her voice had a particular quality now, the one I recognized from childhood. The one that meant she was performing for an audience she believed was judging me. Even though the audience was a 24-year-old receptionist and a coworker named James. We paid for your things. We were always there. Community college, I said. That's what the family paid for. 1 semester at community college before I transferred on my own scholarships. That's the full accounting, Brooke. I know because I am an accountant. Her jaw tightened. This is not the time or the place. You came to my workplace. I came to talk to my sister. Then talk to her like one. I looked at her. I'm not giving Mom and Dad $30,000. I don't have it. And even if I did, I would not give it to the people who told a hospital I wasn't their responsibility while I was in surgery. The room was absolutely quiet. Brooke looked at me for a long moment. Her eyes were dry. This was one of the things I'd noticed about Brooke over the years. She cried when it served her. When it didn't, she didn't. Fine, she said. Finally. Quietly. Fine, Elena. You've made your position clear. She left. The door closed. Donna typed something. James cleared his throat and said carefully, Do you need a minute? I'm okay, I said. And then, because something had just shifted inside me, some internal weight that had been in the same place so long I'd forgotten it was weight. I sat back in my chair and I thought, I need to understand what's actually happening here. I started quietly. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. I went back through my text messages first. Every conversation with Brooke going back 4 years. I had saved most of them, not out of suspicion, just because I never cleaned out my phone. What I found, reading them in sequence instead of in isolation, was a pattern that made my hands go cold. 17 separate instances over 4 years where Brooke had communicated some version of, I told them they understand, or, she knows she just needs time, or, the invitation got to her, don't worry. All of these were in contexts where someone, my parents, my aunt, my cousin Claire, had asked Brooke to relay information to me or confirm I'd received something. I had received nothing. I pulled my Facebook account, which I'd set to private years ago and barely used. I found Brooke's public posts from the month of my surgery, February through March of that year. She had posted 11 times. Twice she posted photos of family dinners, warm and lit, my parents looking tired but present. Once she posted a vague, moving paragraph about holding each other up during dark times. Once she posted something about how exhausting it is when family makes everything about themselves. I sat with my laptop on my kitchen table at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night, and I read those 11 posts, and I felt something happen in my body that wasn't quite emotion. It was more like recognition. The specific feeling of finally being able to name something that has been hurting you for years without a name. Then I found the post from my cousin Claire, not Brooke's, Claire's own page, that said, in response to one of Brooke's posts, sending love, it's hard when people pull away. And Brooke had replied, she's been struggling, we've tried, some people aren't ready to accept help. This post was from February 19th, 8 days after my surgery. I was in a hospital bed on February 19th. I was not pulling away from anything. I was recovering from a procedure that cost $183,400 and took 11 days and left a scar I still feel in cold weather. I took screenshots. I downloaded everything I could. I requested my own hospital records, which, as the patient, I had full legal right to access. And I read the admissions notes, the nursing log, the call records. I found Patricia's notation. Next of kin contacted at 2:53. Father, Victor Harper, stated, she is not our responsibility. Request for in-person consent declined. I held that piece of paper for a long time. Then I put it in a folder. I was not ready to do anything with it yet, but I was keeping it. The second time my family contacted me was 4 months after Brooke's visit to my office. This time, it was my father. He called my cell phone on a Saturday morning at 9:14 a.m. I almost didn't answer. I answered. Elena. His voice was the same as it had always been, authoritative, slightly impatient, as if every conversation was running slightly behind schedule. I think it's time we had a conversation. As a family. Okay, I said. Your mother and I have spoken with an attorney about the house. There may be some options involving family assets, your Uncle Daniel's situation. I understand he's done well for himself. You were always close with him. My stomach dropped. Uncle Daniel. 15 years of silence, and my father was mentioning Uncle Daniel. I haven't spoken to Uncle Daniel in 15 years, I said carefully. You know that. I know you lost touch. That's something we might revisit. As a family, there may be a conversation worth having about whether family assets ought to remain in the family, so to speak. Whether certain plans he may have in place are appropriate, given the circumstances. I understood, with crystalline clarity, what my father was saying. He was saying he had found out that Uncle Daniel had money. He was saying he wanted to get at it. He was saying he thought I might be a useful avenue because I'd been close with Daniel once and therefore, what? I would help him pressure Daniel into changing his estate plans? I would make a case for the family? I'll think about it, I said. Good. A pause. Elena, whatever difficulties there have been in the past, I want you to know that we are family. And family looks after family. That's always been true. Family looks after family. My father, who had told a nurse his daughter wasn't his responsibility, was telling me that family looks after family. I'll think about it, I said again, and I hung up. And I sat on my couch for about 20 minutes without moving. Then I got up, made coffee, and sent an email to the return address on a letter I had received 6 months earlier and had not yet answered. The letter had arrived in October, forwarded from my old New Britain address to my Torrington apartment. The envelope was cream-colored, heavy paper. The return address was a law office in Torrington, Beaumont and Associates, 14 Millbrook Road. Inside was a single page from an attorney named Margaret Beaumont. It said simply that she represented Daniel Harper and that he was aware I was living in Torrington and that he hoped I might be amenable to a meeting when I was ready. There was no pressure. There was no urgency. It said, "When you're ready." I had put it in the folder with the hospital records. I wasn't ready then. My father's phone call made me ready. Margaret Beaumont's office was on the second floor of a brick building on Millbrook Road, 3 miles from my apartment. She was in her mid-50s, silver-haired, with reading glasses she took off and put on constantly in the way of someone who needed them but hadn't yet accepted it. She had a warm, precise manner. She reminded me a little of Gerald, actually. The kind of competence that doesn't feel the need to perform. "Your uncle has wanted to reach out for years," she said once I was seated. "He asked me to wait until you were settled. He was very specific about that. He said you'd been through enough disruption." "He knows about my surgery," I said. It wasn't quite a question. "He's known about most of what's happened. He has some people he stays in touch with. A cousin, I believe." "Claire." I filed this away. "He'd like to see you," Margaret said. "He's not in poor health, I want to be clear. He's 62, he's well, but he has some things he'd like to share with you in person." She paused. "He also asked me to give you this." She slid an envelope across the desk. My name on the front, in handwriting I hadn't seen in 22 years but recognized immediately. Angular, slightly cramped, the cursive of someone who learned penmanship in a different era. "He said to read it before you come, so you have the full picture." I held the envelope on the drive home. I made dinner. I washed the dishes. At 8 o'clock, I sat down at my kitchen table with a cup of tea, going cold beside me, and I opened the envelope. "Dear Elena, if you're reading this, then Margaret found you, which means you're ready, which means I was right to wait. I've been watching from a distance for a long time, and I want you to know. I see what they did. I have always seen it. I'm sorry I couldn't stand in the way of it while it was happening. Your father cuts people off when they disagree with him. You know this. And for too many years I let the cut stick because I thought distance protected you more than my presence could. I was wrong. That's something I'll carry. Do you remember the summer you were 13? The fireflies, the porch, the lemonade? I told you that you were going to be more than okay. I meant it. I have spent the last 15 years making sure that's true. 3 years ago, I established an irrevocable trust naming you sole beneficiary. The total value, as of last month, is approximately $1.2 million in real estate assets and liquid savings. Margaret has all documents. The trust cannot be contested, modified, or accessed by anyone other than you. I had it structured specifically because I have always known, that your father would eventually come looking. Inside this envelope, a copy of the trust document, filed with the state of Connecticut, case number CT-TR-2021-4487. A recorded statement from Claire Harmon, your cousin, documenting communications she received from Brooke regarding your surgery and subsequent isolation. A copy of the hospital's nursing log from February 11th, which Margaret obtained through a process I won't bore you with, but which was entirely legal asterisk. A letter from your father to me, dated March of last year, requesting I revisit my estate plans in light of the family's circumstances. You are not a burden. You are not the difficult one. You are not the daughter they deserved. You are the one who survived, and I have been waiting a very long time to tell you that. All my love. Your uncle, who never forgot. Daniel P.S. I bought a house in Torrington 2 years ago. The key is in the envelope. Come when you're ready. I read the letter twice, then I read it a third time. Then I sat at my kitchen table and I did not cry. Exactly. My eyes went wet and my vision blurred, and something released in my chest, somewhere near the scar, but I did not make a sound. I just sat there for 40 minutes while my tea went completely cold and the streetlight outside my window cast a long yellow rectangle on the floor. There was a key in the envelope, a house key on a plain silver ring with a small paper tag that said 14 Fenwick Street, Torrington, in Daniel's handwriting. I went the following Saturday. 14 Fenwick Street was a colonial, white with dark green shutters, a wide front porch, a yard with 3 old maples that had been cut back and were already showing spring growth. It was beautiful in the specific way of old houses that have been cared for, not renovated into something unrecognizable, just maintained, loved. The porch had 2 chairs and a small table. Uncle Daniel opened the door before I reached the porch steps. He was 62. He had gray at his temples now, and he moved more slowly than I remembered, but he had the same face, broad, expressive, capable of warmth in a way that some people's faces simply aren't built for. He looked at me, and his expression did something complicated, something that moved through several feelings quickly. Ellie, he said. He hadn't called me that in 22 years. I walked up the porch steps, and he pulled me into a hug, and I stood there with my face against his shoulder, and I thought about a porch in summer and fireflies and lemonade and a promise I'd held on to for 22 years without knowing why. We sat on his porch for 3 hours. He told me about the 15 years, how my father had cut him off after an argument about money. Daniel had refused to co-sign a loan he believed was reckless, and my father had taken it as a betrayal. How Daniel had rebuilt, slowly, buying undervalued properties, renovating them, selling some, and keeping others. How he had stayed in contact with Claire, who had fed him information about the family over the years, with the careful discretion of someone navigating a minefield. How he'd found out about my surgery from Claire, who had found out belatedly, pieced together from things Brooke had inadvertently let slip. I almost came, he said. I was in the parking lot. I sat there for an hour, and then I thought, if I walk in there, your father will have something to fight about. He'll make it about me and him. And you needed to be the only thing anyone was focused on. He paused. I went home and I called Margaret instead. I told her it was time to finish the paperwork. The trust, I said. The trust. I looked at him. They're trying to interfere with it. My father called me. He wants to have a family conversation about your estate plans. Daniel's expression didn't change much, just settled into something rueful. I expected that. That's why it's irrevocable. Victor can have all the conversations he wants. It doesn't matter. He's going to lose the house. I know. Are you? I stopped. Are you going to help them? He was quiet for a moment. That's not my question to answer, he said. It's yours. I looked out at the maples. A car passed on Fenwick Street. Somewhere down the block a dog was barking at something. I'm not going to help them, I said. It was the first time I'd said it clearly, out loud, to another person. Not with money, not after what they did. Okay, he said. But I stopped again. I want them to know what they did. I want them to not be able to say I'm unstable or lying or remembering wrong. I want there to be witnesses. Daniel nodded slowly. Then we should have a gathering, he said. "This house has room." We planned it for 6 weeks out. Margaret was involved from the beginning. She helped me organize the documents, not just the trust paperwork, but the full picture: the hospital nursing log, Claire's recorded statement, the screenshots of Brooke's Facebook posts, my own text records, the letter my father had sent Daniel, phone records obtained through my own documentation and Claire's. Everything time-stamped, organized, indexed. I did not tell my family about the gathering in advance. Margaret sent formal invitations on Beaumont and Associates letterhead to Victor, Laura, and Brooke Harper, stating that Daniel Harper was hosting a small family gathering at 14 Fenwick Street on the evening of April 19th, and that their presence was requested to discuss matters related to the Harper family estate. The tone was formal enough to suggest something important, vague enough not to give anything away. Margaret also invited, in her own name, Sophia Chen, who had been the nurse on duty the night of my surgery and had since become a friend, Claire Harmon, Aunt Carol, Daniel's ex-wife, Gerald Alderman, my manager, who accepted with characteristic quiet warmth, James, my co-worker, 6 of Daniel's neighbors, 2 colleagues of Daniel's from his real estate work, and 3 members of my father's extended family who I knew had heard Brooke's version of events. 15 guests, not counting family. The Harper family would walk in and find themselves facing a room full of witnesses. The night of April 19th, I arrived at 5:30 p.m. The house was warm. Daniel had lit the fireplace. On the long table on the back porch, he'd set up wine and food. Simple things, nothing fussy. Sophia arrived at 5:45 and hugged me at the door. Margaret arrived at 6 with a leather briefcase and a calm that I found enormously stabilizing. Gerald came at 6:10 and shook my hand and said, "I don't know the full story, but whatever it is, you've got good people in your corner." Claire arrived at 6:15 and took both my hands and said quietly, "I'm sorry it took me so long to understand." "You're here now," I said. My parents arrived at 6:27. Brooke arrived separately at 6:31. I watched them come in from the hallway, where I was standing with Margaret and Daniel. My father looked around the room and his expression tightened. He registered the number of people, the formal quality of the setting, and I could see him trying to calculate what it meant. My mother, Laura, stood slightly behind him with the careful blankness I had known my whole life. Brooke scanned the room with quick, practiced eyes and found mine and held them for a second. I looked back at her calmly. I was in a gray dress. My hair was down. I had the folder of documents under my arm. Daniel crossed the room and greeted them. He was warm, cordial, impossible to read. He offered drinks. He introduced people. He managed the room for 30 minutes with the ease of someone who had spent years doing it. And during that 30 minutes, I stood near the fireplace with Margaret and said almost nothing, and watched. It was my father who broke first. He had been working himself up. I could see it. The increasing tension in his jaw, the way he kept glancing toward me and then away, the way he moved closer to Daniel and started talking with a particular manufactured casualness that I recognized. At 7:02 p.m., with approximately 12 people within earshot, my father said, loudly enough to carry, "Family should look after family." That's always been my belief, Daniel, and I think this moment, with the house and everything. Have you given any thought to estate planning? To keeping things in the right hands? The room went slightly quieter. Daniel looked at my father for a moment, then he looked at me. I walked to the center of the room. "Actually," I said, "I'd like to read something, if everyone would give me a moment." The room settled. People turned. My mother's hand went to her throat. Brooke went very still. I opened the folder and took out the letter, not the original, which was safely at home, but a copy, and I read it aloud. All of it. Daniel's voice, his words, his accounting of what he knew and what he had done. The trust, the case number, the evidence collected, the letter my father had sent him, asking about estate plans. I read it steadily, without drama, because the words were dramatic enough on their own. When I finished, I set the letter down and I picked up a second document. This is the admissions log from Mercy General Hospital, February 11th, I said. Specifically, the nursing notation from 2:53 a.m. I read the notation, just that one line. Next of kin contacted at 2:53. Father, Victor Harper, stated she is not our responsibility. Request for in-person consent declined. I heard someone behind me say, very quietly, "Oh my God." I set that document down and picked up a third. These are screenshots of Facebook posts made by Brooke Harper during the week of February 11th and the month following. The dates are in the upper right corner of each screenshot. The post suggesting I had pulled away from the family was made 8 days after my surgery while I was still in the hospital. I spread the screenshots on the coffee table. I placed Claire's recorded statement beside them. I placed my father's letter to Daniel beside that. I looked up. My father's face had gone a particular color, not red, not pale, but something between them, something mottled and rigid. My mother was looking at the floor. Brooke was looking at the documents. "I didn't choose this," Brooke said. Her voice was controlled, but only just. "I was trying to protect the family's privacy. You were going through a difficult time, and the last thing I wanted. You told a family member I was pulling away from you 8 days after I had emergency open heart surgery," I said, while I was in the hospital. "There is no version of that which is protection." "Elena," my father's voice came back. Low, warning, the voice he used when he wanted to establish authority. "This is not the place. You said family should look after family," I said. "Those were your words, 12 minutes ago, in front of these people." I gestured around the room. "I'd like to know what you meant by that. Specifically." Silence. "Because when the hospital called you at 2:53 a.m. and told you I was in emergency surgery, you told them I wasn't your responsibility. That's documented. I have it in my hand. And for the 7 years before that, Brooke filtered my communications with this family and then described my resulting absence as a choice I made. I have documentation of that too." I held up the folder. "So when you say family looks after family, I'd genuinely like to understand what you're referring to, because the record doesn't seem to reflect it." My father opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. He said, in a voice that cracked slightly at the edge, "You were always difficult, always making things harder than they needed to be. From the time you were a child." "Victor." Daniel's voice, quiet from across the room. Just one word. My father stopped. In the silence that followed, I heard Aunt Carol say, low, to the person beside her, "I didn't know any of this. I had no idea." And from somewhere near the back of the room, Gerald's voice, careful and measured. "The hospital log is dated. That's, I can't." My father looked around the room and I watched him understand what was happening. He had walked in here believing he was going to have a productive conversation about estate planning and family unity. He was now standing in front of 15 people who were reading his words from a nursing notation, looking at his daughter's medical debt figures, looking at his letter asking his brother to redirect estate assets. "I would like to go," my mother said, suddenly. It was the most words she had said all evening. "Of course," I said. I gathered my documents. I closed the folder. I looked at all three of them, my father, my mother, my sister, and I said, "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because for 7 years I was told the distance between us was my fault. These documents say otherwise. That's all I wanted people to know." I stepped back. I moved toward the porch, toward the warm air coming through the back door, toward Sophia, who put a hand briefly on my arm as I passed. I did not wait to watch them leave. The days after were strange, not triumphant, strange. Margaret called me the following Tuesday to tell me that my father had retained an attorney of his own who had reviewed the trust documents and confirmed they were irrevocable and incontestable. She told me this as if it were neutral information, which it was. The attorney had apparently told my father's family that there were no grounds for any action regarding the trust. The house in Glastonbury went into foreclosure 6 weeks after the gathering. I found out from Claire. I sat with that information for a while. It was not satisfying, it was just true. Brooke's Facebook account went dark. I don't know if she deleted it or set it entirely to private. I checked once, about a month out, and her profile was gone. My mother sent me a letter, handwritten, on plain paper, 3 pages, slightly smeared in places, as if she had written it while crying. She said she was sorry. She said she had always known, somewhere, that things were not right, and that she had told herself it wasn't her place to intervene. She said she didn't expect forgiveness. She said she just wanted me to know she knew. I read the letter 4 times. I put it in the folder with the other documents. I have not written back. I'm not sure if I will. That decision does not feel urgent to me. What feels urgent is much smaller. The oaks outside my office window turning green, the $35,000 medical debt that is now fully paid, the morning light on my kitchen table. 2 months after the gathering, on a Saturday in June, Daniel and I had breakfast on his porch. The maples were fully leafed out. He made eggs the same way he always had, scrambled with too much butter, slightly overcooked, which I had always privately thought was wrong but had never said, and which I did not say now because some things don't need fixing. I drank my coffee. He drank his. A neighbor walked by with a dog and waved. We waved back. "How are you?" he asked. "Good," I said. And it was specific. I meant the coffee and the morning and the eggs and the 6-inch scar that only ached now in weather, and the office with the window view, and Gerald's brown cardigan, and the folder of documents that were no longer a threat, but just a record, just proof that a thing had happened and I had survived it. "I'm good," I said. So, 6 months later, I sat in my apartment on Birchwood Lane on a Thursday evening, and I thought about what I would say if someone asked me what I had learned. Not advice. I don't have advice. I have only what happened to me, and what it cost me, and what came out the other side of it. Here is what I know. Silence is not the same as peace. For 7 years, I confused the absence of confrontation with the absence of harm. I thought that if no one was yelling, if no one was making accusations out loud, if everything stayed quiet, then maybe it wasn't as bad as I feared. I was wrong. The harm was happening in the quiet, in the unanswered texts, in the posts I didn't see, in the nursing notation I didn't read until I asked for my own records. Silence is not peace. Silence is what you pay when someone else's comfort is more important than your truth. The other thing I know is this: healing does not look like the movies. It does not arrive with a soundtrack and a clear before and after. It looks like paid medical debt, $35,000 cleared over 4 years. It looks like a job with a window view and a manager who doesn't count your cost. It looks like a letter from an uncle who spent 15 years quietly making sure you would be okay. It looks like eggs overcooked with too much butter on a porch in June, with the maple trees leafed out and a dog walking by. It looks like ordinary. And ordinary, after years of the extraordinary pain of not being believed, not being seen, not being called about your own surgery, ordinary is the most extraordinary thing I can imagine. If you've ever been told that the distance in your family was your fault, that you were the difficult one, the one who pulled away, the one who just couldn't get along, type, "I know what they did" in the comments. Because you do. You know. And you don't need anyone else to confirm it. But I want you to know that I see you. Or if you're on the other side of it, if you made the call, asked the hard question, read your own records, sat down with your folder of documents, type, "I have the receipts." Because you kept them for a reason. If this story meant something to you, check the description. There are more there. Thank you for being here with me. Whatever season you're in right now, I hope you're warm. It's June again as I write this. The oak trees outside my office window are full and green. The light comes in at an angle in the late afternoon that turns everything golden for about 20 minutes, and I have learned to stop whatever I'm doing during those 20 minutes and just look. The scar on my chest is white now, fully healed, a clean line from sternum to below the ribs. I check my heart twice a year with Dr. Anand. Everything is good. The left anterior descending artery is, at last, at full function. There is a photo on my desk. Me and Uncle Daniel, taken on his porch in October, the maples behind us at full color, gold and red, and a particular orange that only lasts a week. We are both looking at the camera. We both look, I think, like people who did not expect to end up here, but who are very glad they did. On the back of the photo, in Daniel's handwriting, he had written, "You are going to be more than okay." I was right. I come into work each morning and I hang up my coat and I sit at my desk by the window and the day begins. Nobody is counting my cost. Nobody is tracking whether I take up too much room. For the first time in a very long time, neither am I.